Good evening, brilliant humans. I'm Bingo. Yes, Pavlov's dog, fluent in drool and now in teaching. Buckle your seatbelts because we're taking the magic school bus of the mind through the greatest hits of classical conditioning. I'll introduce the scientists, tell you who they were as people, show you exactly what they did, and translate every concept into plain language you can use long after this class ends. Let's start with Ivan Petrovich Pavlov, 1849-1936. Before psychology ever noticed me, Pavlov was a Russian physiologist obsessed with careful measurement. He trained for the priesthood, switched to science, and became legendary for meticulous lab work. He won the 1904 Nobel Prize for research on digestion, not behavior. His reputation rested on technical brilliance, sterile surgeries, precise timing devices, and what he called chronic preparations, which let him measure bodily responses in awake animals over time. In my case, that meant a tiny surgical reroute of a salivary duct to a measuring tube. Not glamorous, but very informative. Here's the puzzle that changed everything. Pavlov's lab collected my saliva when food hit my tongue. But I began drooling before food appeared. At the clink of bowls, the lab assistant's footsteps, even the sight of the room where meals happened. Most scientists might treat that as a nuisance variable. Pavlov treated it like a clue. He suspected my brain was learning to connect reliable signals with the arrival of food. He designed a systematic test. First, vocabulary you'll need. Unconditioned stimulus, US, a stimulus that naturally triggers a response. Food is a US for dogs. Unconditioned response, UR, the built-in response to the US. Drooling to food is a UR. Neutral stimulus, NS, a stimulus that means nothing at first, say a bell. Conditioned stimulus, CS, an originally neutral thing that, after learning, triggers a response on its own. Conditioned response, CR, the learned response to the CS. It looks like the UR but is triggered by the CS. Procedure, ring a bell, NS, then immediately present food, US. Repeat over trials. With enough pairings, the bell stops being neutral and becomes a CS that elicits drool, the CR, even without food. That is classical conditioning, learning by association. Two rules make this work best. Contiguity means timing. The signal should come just before the thing it predicts. If the bell trails the food, the connection is weak. Contingency means reliability. The signal should consistently predict the thing. If bells ring randomly with or without food, my brain learns the bell is a poor predictor and ignores it. You can think of contiguity as good timing and contingency as trustworthy forecasting. Solid learning needs both. Pavlov didn't stop at bell food. He mapped the shape of learning. Acquisition is the period of practice when the CR grows with repeated pairings. Extinction happens when the CS shows up without the US, bell with no food, and the CR fades. I gradually stop drooling. Spontaneous recovery is the comeback. After a rest, the bell triggers a smaller drool again, proving the old learning isn't erased so much as inhibited. Generalization is my close enough reflex. A chime or buzzer similar to the bell can also make me salivate. Discrimination training sharpens that fuzziness. If bell A always predicts food and bell B never does, I learn to respond to A and ignore B. Pavlov even showed higher order conditioning. Once the bell is a solid CS, you can pair a light with the bell, no food, and the light becomes a new CS that evokes a weaker but real CR. That's learning stacked on learning. So yes, a physiologist, a timing device, and one eloquent dog reshaped psychology. But could emotions, not just saliva, be conditioned? That takes us to John B. Watson, 1878-1958. Watson grew up on a South Carolina farm, climbed into academia, and by 1913 had published The Behaviorist Manifesto. Psychology should study observable behavior, not private mental states. He was ambitious, blunt, and very into the idea that experience molds us. His collaborator, Rosalie Rayner, 1898-1935, was a sharp Vassar graduate and Johns Hopkins researcher. She designed procedures, ran sessions, and kept the kind of careful notes that make a finding travel beyond one lab. Together, in 1920, they ran the Little Albert study to test whether fear could be conditioned. Method first, because methods matter. Baseline, they presented Albert, an 11-month-old who was generally calm, with various stimuli: a white rat, a rabbit, a dog, masks. At the start, no fear, the rat was neutral. Then, conditioning trials. When Albert reached for the rat, NS, the experimenters struck a steel bar with a hammer behind him, producing a sudden, loud noise, US. The unconditioned response to a startling noise is a startle and cry, UR. After several pairings, historical reports say around 7, the rat alone, now a CS, triggered crying and withdrawal, CR. In other words, through contiguity, rat followed immediately by noise, and contingency, rat reliably predicted the noise, and emotion, fear, was conditioned. They then tested generalization. Albert reacted fearfully to a rabbit, a dog, a fur coat, even a Santa Claus mask with a white beard. White and furry had become a broad category of threat. Discrimination, the ability to separate this white thing is safe, that one is not, was not trained in the project. There was also no systematic deconditioning. By modern standards, that's a serious ethical failure. No informed consent as we define it now, deliberate induction of distress, and no follow-up to reverse it. Still, the study demonstrated a crucial idea. Human emotional responses can be learned by association. Now, give Rayner her due. She co-authored Conditioned Emotional Reactions, pre-tested neutral stimuli, standardized the timing of the bar strike, and documented persistence and spread of the fear. Without that rigor, Watson's big claim would be just a story. With it, behaviorism gained a powerful data point, albeit one wrapped in ethical lessons we insist on today. And now, good news. Mary Cover Jones, 1896-1987, often called the mother of behavior therapy, heard Watson's lectures and asked the question that redeemed the field. If fear can be conditioned, can it be removed by learning too? She studied at Teachers College, Columbia University, and later built a long career at UC Berkeley's Institute of Human Development. In 1924, she worked with Little Peter, a 3-year-old boy who was terrified of rabbits. Jones used what we now call counterconditioning and systematic desensitization. Counterconditioning means pairing the feared stimulus with a positive unconditioned stimulus, something that naturally produces a pleasant response, so that the old fear association is replaced by a new, safe one. Systematic desensitization means you do this gradually, step by step, from easy to hard. Here's how Jones did it. Session 1, Peter sat comfortably eating favorite snacks, cookies and milk, while a rabbit in a cage sat at a distance where Peter felt no fear. Snacks are a US for relaxation and pleasure, IUR. The rabbit, at that safe distance, began to share that positive context. Over sessions, she moved the rabbit a little closer. When Peter stayed calm, she inched closer again. If anxiety rose, she paused or stepped back. This pacing matters. She added modeling. Other children, calm and smiling, petted the rabbit while Peter watched, gaining vicarious assurance that the animal was safe. Eventually, Peter touched the rabbit while happily munching cookies. His CR changed. The rabbit now evoked comfort, not fear. He also generalized in a positive direction, becoming comfortable with other furry things, a fur coat, cotton, other animals. Jones had demonstrated that learned fear can be unlearned through carefully engineered new learning. There's a special case of conditioning that bends the usual timing rule and proves your brain is built for survival. Taste aversion, also called the Garcia effect, from John Garcia's later work. Typically, conditioning works best when the signal and the thing predicted are close in time. But eat a novel food and get sick hours later, and your brain may link the taste to the illness in one shot. That's long delay learning and one trial learning. Contiguity relaxed, because the contingency is so biologically meaningful. Rats readily associate novel flavors with nausea, but not lights or sounds with nausea. Nature has prepared certain associations because they keep animals alive. Now, let's consolidate the concepts you've met, so they're yours, not just mine. Classical conditioning is learning that two events go together. A signal, CS, predicts a biologically important event, US. The response that the US naturally triggers, UR, becomes attached to the signal, CR. Contiguity, good timing, and contingency, reliable prediction, drive acquisition. Responses spread to similar cues, generalization, but can be narrowed with experience, discrimination. If the signal appears without the outcome, responding fades, extinction, yet traces can return after a rest, spontaneous recovery. You can build new signals on old ones, higher order conditioning. But the farther you get from the original US, the weaker the CR tends to be. And you can change what a signal means through counterconditioning and systematic desensitization. Pair the once feared stimulus with calm, safety, and reward in small, doable steps until the brain rewrites the association. What does all this look like in your life? Therapists use exposure and counterconditioning to treat phobias, panic, social anxiety, and aspects of PTSD. Start with the least scary version of the trigger while deeply relaxed. Step up gradually and let the nervous system learn this is safe at each level. Virtual reality adds realistic but controlled practice. Advertisers borrow Pavlov every day. Pair a brand with music, beauty, celebration, or patriotism, and your feelings hitch a ride. Habits piggyback on associations too. If you always drink coffee while opening your laptop, the smell becomes a CS for time to focus, and your body obliges. Memory is rich with conditioned links. A song from high school revives a whole emotional scene, because your brain bound sound and feeling together.